Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 20 of the Memorial Memo KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast, brought to you our friends over at Friends of Cole. Katie, this episode, it's kind of this is going to be a hard one because I'm excited, but also kind of dreading talking about the Oklahoma game. But Katie, before we dive into all of it, just how are you doing today?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. You said episode 20, and if you think about that, I mean, 20 weeks of this show, that's like 5 months we've been doing this. And so it's crazy that we're finally getting to the end. But I would say this is the most exciting part of the season.
Oh, I would agree. This is the best time of the year. March. Well, the good thing about March is that it gives and it takes, and it took a little bit from Kentucky. But before we get into that, just going to go do the AP poll, stuff like that. Kentucky dropped one spot this week. They were number 12, fell down to number 13. I don't think that's anything crazy. I do think Oklahoma was number 10. They fell down to number 11. That surprised me a little bit. I know they got beat pretty bad by South Carolina in that game the next day on Saturday. But Katie, you beat Kentucky. Kentucky's a top 12 team, top 15 team. Beating them on a neutral court, I thought that'd be enough to at least stay. But regarding Kentucky, Katie, down one spot seems pretty justifiable in the end.
Yeah, it definitely seems justifiable. And just like you, I'm confused about Oklahoma dropping. I'm also very confused about Texas dropping 4 total spots, even though South Carolina kind of smacked them in the championship. I don't think they deserve to drop 4 spots. I don't even think Oklahoma deserved to drop a spot, but Kentucky probably, yeah.
I guess you could say it's because they got smacked, but Texas. Well, here's the thing about when you play South Carolina, right? South Carolina may be the only team I can think of in just sports in general where your chances of beating South Carolina it's not even mainly dependent on, okay, what can you do? What can you execute? It's is South Carolina today? Are they clicking today? Because as you saw, when they're not clicking, UConn beats them by 30 and they're on their home floor. But when they beat, a top 5 Texas team. Well, I guess now what, number 6, something like that. He beat a top 10 Texas team by 20. Like South Carolina, I think they're like the only team where it's like, if we want to play, we'll beat you by 20. If we don't, we may lose by 20. It's just it's kind of you're just there sitting waiting for whatever's going to happen to you. Kentucky moves up one spot to number 18 in the net rankings. So even though they moved down in the AP poll, they go up in the net. The net, of course, is like the most like numbers based system out there. It's less human element, more numbers based. For a while, this is one of the bigger things that the committee uses for the NCAA tournament. Not the only thing, as we've come to figure out. But Katie, Kentucky being a top 20 team in the net, still very impressive, very important for moving forward.
Yeah, and I would say it's definitely promising considering that the net is the most statistically accurate ranking. So the statistics show that Kentucky moved up this past week despite a loss. So I think that that's a good thing to keep in mind.
And there's just so many like great teams. Like Alabama's one spot ahead at 17. Tennessee is still up there. Ole Miss is still up there. Like you have all these great SEC teams. Of course, Texas, LSU, South Carolina, Oklahoma, always going to be up there. This is a very stacked league. And any win you can get against any of those teams is great. And any kind of loss you take, barring it being like a horrible, like 20-point loss, you can live when you lose to an Ole Miss or an Oklahoma. Speaking of Oklahoma, Katie, that was just sad, right? We're going to go ahead and get into it. Kentucky lost to Oklahoma 69-55 or 69-65, excuse me. Let me tell you, I had the great pleasure of going to Greenville, South Carolina to cover this game. Now, did I know in the back of my mind, Katie, that it was a possibility that Kentucky would lose this game? Of course I did. Of course I knew there was a chance. Did I expect it to happen? No, of course not. You all may remember the last time I was on this podcast, I made the bold prediction that Kentucky's going to go to the finals. I thought my spirits were high. I was like, we already beat Oklahoma. We got this. Who's Reagan Beers, right? Well, she gets the best whistle in the country. I mean, Katie, if I could reach through this camera and smack you across the face, it would be a foul on you if I were Reagan Beers. I mean, it's just It's unbelievable. Of course, she's a great player, but a great whistle for her too. The loss, Katie, it's not a bad loss. Like on paper, it's not a bad loss because you again top 10 team or top 11 team now, but top 10 team 4-point loss on a neutral court. Katie, that's not a bad loss. It just really sucks for Kentucky after fighting to get the double bye to go one and done in Greenville.
Yeah, I mean, I would say more than anything, it's just a very frustrating loss because you go into the half up 5 and the momentum is there and you're containing all of their players and you're doing your job, but then you have some players who didn't necessarily show up the way that you kind of needed them to. And we'll get into the nitty gritty of the players here in just a second. But overall, I think, like you said, it was not a bad game on paper. When you look at the stat sheet, a lot of people did very good. But like I just said, there were a few people who didn't show up, and I feel like can't have the same 3 people scoring in a game. It's just not going to work out for you in tournament time.
It's one of those things where you knew Georgia Amoore was going to come do her thing, and she did. She had 29 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. Like, she did her thing, but it can't be just her. I thought it was pretty telling whenever, well, first of all, before I even talked about specific players, you had a 10-point lead, right? You talked about the 5-point halftime lead. Well, late in the third quarter, you had a 10-point lead. And Oklahoma goes on, I think, a 24-12 run to retake the lead and, stretch their own big lead. And it was really disappointing for me, Katie, to kind of see that. And like I was saying, halftime of the Oklahoma-Georgia game on Thursday, of course, Kentucky would play the winner of that game. The SEC Network panel, they had Kenny Brooks on at halftime. And they asked him, they're like, Kenny, who has to play well against the winner of this game for you all to advance? Like, who needs to play good in this SEC tournament? And I thought it was very telling when Kenny Brooks said Amelia Hassett and Tiani Key. And, Katie, I don't think it's a coincidence Kentucky loses that game, and you look at the box score, they combined for 9 points.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit weird, and I think I said something about this in my rapid reaction that I did, but like about Tiani Key, I think at this point you kind of expect her to put up double digits, and that's what she needs to do for this team to win. But I kind of want to talk about Amelia Hassett a little bit more because someone brought up a really good point, and I can't remember. I think I saw it on the board. I think someone said it on the board. And it was about how you see Amelia Hassett during non-conference play, and she is playing. Okay, Phoenix's lights just went out,
My
but
light just went out.
I'll just keep talking. Amelia Hassett during non-conference play, we were like, oh my gosh, she's so good. She's exactly what this team needed, and she's like a diamond in the rough from a JUCO school. And then we get to conference play, and she's still playing very well, and Phoenix's light just went out again.
You keep talking, Katie.
Yeah, we get to conference play. She's still playing very good, and then she ends up getting a little bit sick. Something happens. She's a little bit under the weather. Obviously not 100%, and she's putting up 2 points over 2 games. And then since that game, or since those 2 games, I don't think that she's really been the same. I don't think that she has played the same. I don't know. And this is not me saying that I think that's related at all. I don't know if maybe it caused a slump. I don't know if maybe there's some kind of like confidence loss coming from that. But for her to be one of the strongest offensive players coming into the season, and we're heading out of the season and she hasn't really done anything spectacular like we had been seeing, it's just a little bit discouraging as someone who watches the games because you know what she can do, and it's just not there. It's not there.
Amelia Hassett is just like this little light here I had from my computer, right? She early on showed flashes of potential, and I think you saw some great things out of her. But again, just like this little light here, right at the end, just kind of gave up. Little fatigued, a little low on battery, just couldn't quite get it done through the end. But no, in all seriousness, Katie, I think it's a great point you made about Amelia, and a great point that someone brought up to you, because I think when you're looking at Amelia, and I think, you know what, I think they're right. Like we talked about in the non-conference, how she was doing such a great job of kind of surpassing our expectations, and she Like I remember that Louisville game so vividly, where she had, I think it was like 18, 19 points, but it was the rebounds and free throws, and like I was like, okay, if she can do this against Louisville, she can just do this, you know, she can do this. Um, I don't know what it is, and again, she did have that spell of sickness where uh I feel like it's been long enough. I think it's fair to say, Katie. Uh, I think Kenny had already said she played sick. I think she was a lot sicker than Kenny even alluded to. I won't say specific illnesses, but I'll just say that Amelia was a lot sicker than I think most of us realized, right? And I think it's just ever since then, I don't think she's been the same, kind of like you've been saying, like I've been saying. It's just unfortunate because I don't think you need a ton out of Amelia. I think you can
Mm-mm.
get 10 points a game, 8 rebounds a game. That's all you really need, but you haven't even gotten that much from her. And Katie, I love Amelia. And by the way, when I was in Greenville, I just remembered this. The names, they go by me. I apologize, but I met Amelia's family in Greenville, and I thought I had a long trip. But they'd come from Australia. They've been here in the States for like 3 weeks. I think they actually left back to Australia yesterday. But they told us they love the podcast, and I thought that was cool. They said they share it with their friends and family, which is great, and they wanted a shout out, so here it is. But Amelia, just regarding her, like I just I know like we've seen it. We've seen her been
Mhm.
able to have success. And she's had success against some SEC teams too.
Yeah.
I just wish it was a bit more consistent with her right now, Katie.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I, like you said, I think that she is a great player. And I don't know, like, I hope in a high pressure situation she can kind of show up again and be that Amelia that we want to see again because she was very, very good. She was very good. It almost felt like a home run recruit for Kenny because she came from Eastern Florida State College, which I'd never heard of until we had Amelia Hassett at Kentucky. I just would like to see it again. I think she's so fun to watch and she's very talented, and I see a lot of promise within her, especially if she stays at Kentucky next year, and the way that Kenny has developed her, I think she's become a great player. But yeah, she's definitely, there's a little slump happening right now, and I hope that it goes away soon.
And then with Tiani, it's kind of just like you need her. I mean, you kind of need her production in the same way you need it from Georgia Amoore and Claire Strack. I think you kind of just need it from Tiani. I think you're at a point in the year, especially when you run a really, really thin, 6, 7 person rotation like Kenny does. When you have Tiani Key in the game, Katie, I think you just need to stay out of foul trouble. You need to put up 10, 15 points a game. You need to get, 7, 8 rebounds a game, reject a few shots here and there. I think Tiani Key, it's a blessing and a curse that she's become so important to this team. Like, I'm not saying all the wins and losses hang directly on her, but Katie, there's no doubt she plays a big role in those wins and losses game in and game out.
Yeah, and I feel like I've said this so many times, but I feel like Tiani is the one on the team that has the composure. I feel like she's almost becoming this kind of glue that is like the balance between your guards and your forwards. And even though she plays at the four, she is still very good at ball handling. She's gotten better from three. And so I feel like when she plays good, everyone else plays good. And even though it's Georgia Amoore's job to kind of lead her team and be the facilitator, I feel like Tiani has become almost like this. I guess I could just say like a leader or like another figure for them to look up to because she is so consistent and she is like, you do need the production from her. And so I feel like when you don't have it, it kind of just, I don't want to say it brings everyone else down because that's not what it does, but it just, I feel like it makes everyone else look worse, if that makes sense.
And then I really hate to pick on these players because, of course, we love them and we love whenever they do good. Deja Lawrence gave you 11 points the other day against Oklahoma, but she went 1 of 8 from three. And I've seen, like, it feels like lately, Katie, she started the year shooting like 45% from three, top 10 in the country from beyond the arc. And then it feels like the last couple of weeks, Katie, her shot hasn't fallen. I don't know. It's just a slump right now. or what it is. I don't know if it's a mental thing or if literally it's just not going in. But 1 of 8 against Oklahoma, like she started top 10, or no, again, I think she's like number 9-ish in the country from 3-point range for a while. And lately, Katie, the shots just haven't fallen. And I know you got 11 points out of her, but she shot 5 of 14 from the field. You need Deja Lawrence to be the consistent, I'm going to make, 3-4 threes a game kind of player too.
Yeah, and it's so weird because sometimes I know players have on and off games, but I feel like hers are so opposite from each other. She'll have a game where she'll make 6 or 7 threes and then a game where she makes 1 or 2. And as a guard, like that's pretty much her job is to make those shots. And for her not to be doing that right now, I feel like it's hurting the team's chances in a way because you got to get the production from the perimeter, especially when you're competing with teams that are more physical than you in the paint. I think with Deja, she's a very good defensive player, but I feel like her offense has been a little stagnant, which is why I think she's the player that you kind of overlook on the stat sheet or just like watching the game in general because her offense is not as outstanding as it had been.
And the other thing about her, like you lose, and again, you don't pin losses on one individual because that's not how the game works. Basketball is a team sport like that. But, Kentucky loses by 4. She goes 3 of 8 from the 3-point line. Kentucky wins that game. You know what I mean? Like if she shoots around her average, just shoots 3 of 8, Kentucky wins that game. It's unfortunate. And Matt G, he talked about how Tiani Key missing every layup is a big issue. It does feel like Tiani misses a good amount of layups, even though I kind of feel like that happens with the whole team. But Katie, something else that happens with this whole team, the turnovers are just crazy, right? Like Claire Strack had a really good 12-point, 16-rebound game. But Katie, she turned the ball over. Well, suddenly I can't see it. But she turned the ball over a bunch. She turned the ball over, I think it was 6 times, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 6 times. Tiani Key turned the ball over 5 times. Clara Silva turned the ball over 5 times. Now, clearly that was Oklahoma's game plan of, okay, we're going to double, triple team you all in the post, and, it worked, right? But at the same time, Katie, like, this is college basketball. People are going to double and triple team you. You got to figure out your way around it. Now, some of that could be on the guards not being in their spot to get to, to help with the double team. But I don't know. It's frustrating when you turn the ball over 20 times in a game, Katie.
Yeah, and I feel like earlier in the season, when we were talking about turnovers, 7 of them would come from Georgia. And the craziest part about the game against Oklahoma is that Georgia had 0. She had 0 turnovers. She played almost a perfect game. And it would make sense. We could kind of write off the turnovers from Georgia because she's the one that's handling the ball the most. So it makes sense that she's turning the ball over the most in a probability standpoint. But why our bigs are not taking care of the ball as well as they were earlier this season is a little bit confusing to me just because this is kind of a new thing, it feels like. Like, it doesn't feel like Tiani Key or Clara Strack were struggling with turnovers. And I think it might just be a one-off game. I feel like you said, it was just Oklahoma's game plan. I don't think that it's going to be any kind of issue heading into the tournament, but it is a little frustrating. I think one thing to keep in mind, though, is even though there were 20 turnovers, Oklahoma only scored 14 points off of those, so they're not capitalizing on 13 of the 20 turnovers. I don't know. I feel like that's just something to keep in mind. Like, it could have been a lot worse. Of course, you'd rather not have 20, but can't do anything now.
And, well, I mean, I don't know what I'd have to go back and watch, obviously, but I don't know the percentage, but not all of those turnovers are live balls, so obviously they're not going to score directly off those a lot of the time. Some of them are dead ball turnovers where you just throw it out of bounds or something. But I think regardless, your point there, still pretty valid. But Katie, before we kind of talk about Selection Sunday and whatnot, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor here, Friends of Coal. Friends of Coal is dedicating to informing and educating Kentucky citizens about the coal industry and its vital role in the state's future. We provide a united voice for an industry that has been and remains a critical economic contributor to Kentucky. By working together, we can provide good jobs and benefits for future generations. Coal is resilient, reliable, and affordable. Friends of Coal is a volunteer organization All are invited to be a part of our organization, which consists of proud Kentuckians as well as residents from beyond our borders. Head to friendsofcolekentucky.org to learn more. Now, Katie, we just gave a shout to Friends of Cole. I want to give a shout to Georgia Amoore because it was announced earlier today by UK. I think they maybe put it out before, but UK they put out a press release today. Georgia Amoore, top 15 national ballot for the John R. Wooden Award. That award is given to the best player in the country, right? Or as I think they worded as the most outstanding player in the country. Georgia Amoore, Katie right in the mix, top 15. I don't know if she'll win it. There's a lot of tremendous players, but Georgia Amoore, top 15 Wooden Award. I mean, that's not very common around Lexington, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, it's just she really has done such an incredible job this season. I think the last person that I vividly remember winning this award, and I know it's been several years, but Kelsey Plum won this award back when she was in college, and she's gone on to be a WNBA legend. And I'm not saying that Georgia can't do the same thing, because obviously I'm sure she will make her way in the WNBA, but this is just such a great honor, and it really solidifies her spot as one of the best players in the nation, and also as an All-American that she was named last year. And we talked a little bit maybe Georgia, why is her All-Americanness not showing up yet? Well, it's here now, and now she's one of the best 15 players in the nation. So I think that is just kind of her way of proving all the haters wrong.
Coming into this year, I thought it would be kind of hard for her to be an All-American again, just because she's at Kentucky, where her stats may drop a little bit because the talent around her, that kind of thing. But last week, whenever we went over her stats compared to Paige Beckers and Kiki Rice and Olivia Miles and all these players, I'm sitting there and I'm like, Katie, why is she not the best point guard in the country? Like, she averages the most points and assists. The stat where she's in the company of Sabrina Ionescu and Caitlin Clark, for crying out loud. Most double-digit point games among the finalists. Like, what are we missing? Like, Georgia Amoore, I think she's very clearly the best point guard in the country at this point. I don't know if she's the best player overall. Will she win this Wooden Award? I just don't know. But you talked about an All-American, Katie. I don't feel like there's any reason why Georgia Amoore shouldn't be a first-team All-American now that I kind of sit back and look at it.
Yeah, I mean, she already has gotten her first-team SEC accolades, so I think that saying that she is going to be a first-team All-American this season is not a crazy shout. I think that I think that she can be too, especially considering this second half of the season that she's had. The way that she's played in conference play is arguably better than the way that she played in non-conference play, and she truly is Matt G said it earlier in the comment section that Georgia got a lot of shouting out during the Oklahoma game, and she did, and I was watching it on TV, so I heard all of it, and even the announcers were like, oh, I need to see Georgia turn up. I need to see her turn up and take this game over, and maybe she didn't do that, but it's crazy to think that even these announcers that are supposed to be like unbiased, nonpartisan announcers and workers at ESPN are rooting for Georgia Amoore to do what she can do. And I feel like that is just such a great compliment for her and the way that she plays.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, it was wasn't it? Was it the A crew? Was it? I don't know if that's the A crew or not, but isn't Rebecca Lobo, Ryan Rocco, and Holly Rowe was on the sideline, right? Yeah. I mean, that's a cast of characters right there who all, of course, Rebecca Lobo, who played that, great career herself. Of course, she's always going to love to see players perform, but I thought it was neat seeing them, especially because I guess you don't think about what goes into a broadcast, Katie. But like I'm looking at Holly Rowe on the sidelines, and these I don't know who they're clearly just working like the tech part of ESPN or something, like the camera crew. But this poor guy, he has. I mean, you talk about my light here, which is obviously nothing, but in the same way that my light does this. They have lights like that too. But Katie, they're the size of they're 30-inch TV size. and he's just
Yeah.
holding two of them like this above Holly Rowe's head, and he has like a shoulder strapped camera, like movie camera attached to him, and I'm like, good God. Like, I guess that's what goes into going into a broadcast, but I'm just like, that guy's shoulders and arms have to be killing him. But hey, anything to make Holly Rowe look good on TV for ESPN. Katie, I want to talk about, enough with this Oklahoma, enough with the past. Let's talk about the future a little bit, right? The big pressing question that we're going to talk about today and really until Sunday is Kentucky going to host in the NCAA tournament? Are the first two rounds, the round of 64, round of 32, will they be on Kentucky's home floor in historic Memorial Coliseum? Katie, just before we even dive into it, what's your prediction before we even get into it?
I mean, Kentucky has been predicted as a 3 seed for I don't know how many weeks now. I'm not feeling very concerned that they won't host. It would definitely be a shock to me if we find out that they've dropped to a 5 seed or whatever. So yeah, I would say I think that they probably will host at least the first 2 rounds. So hopefully they do.
Well, the thing with me is I'm kind of like you. I think they are going to host the ESPN bracketology that came out. Which, by the way, I don't know why Charlie Cream does this. I don't know if Lenardi does it too, but like it'll come out at like 2 a.m, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, thanks for the update, Charlie. But Kentucky's still a 3 seed in the latest bracketology. Now, Katie, this is the good part because obviously when you're a top 4 seed, top 16 seeds or whatever, you host. But I think right now, Kentucky fans especially, okay. So let's just go ahead for the hypothetical here. You win your first 2 games, and now you're in the Sweet 16. Okay, there's 2 regions. There's not a bunch of them. And like it is in men's basketball, it's 2 regions. You have Birmingham, Alabama, which I don't know how many hours, maybe like a 5-6 hour drive, something like that.
Yeah,
From
not too
Lexington,
bad.
I'm not totally sure. But Katie, the other region, Spokane, Washington, out in the Pacific Ocean. Now, obviously, if you're a Kentucky fan, one of those is manageable. One of those probably not so manageable, right? If you're wanting to go to the game. So if you're a Kentucky fan, you're really rooting for Kentucky to get the Birmingham regional over the Spokane regional. And thankfully, in the latest bracketology, Kentucky is in that Birmingham region. Now, Katie, I don't know how things are going to end up being, especially, I don't know, with conference tournaments wrapped up, I think we might be safe to start predicting things. In the last few updates of the bracketology, of course, Kentucky's been the 3, and West Virginia's been the 6. And the 14 that Kentucky would play in the first round, that's kind of changed here and there. It's Liberty this time around. But Katie, if West Virginia is the team that comes into Memorial for that second round game, that's a top 25 team, but that's a team I'd feel pretty good about playing. But then again, I think once you get into the second round, it's going to be a top 25 team no matter what. But it's just good to have that game at home, Katie.
Well, first of all, nobody tells me to calm you down. So I'm going to say calm down, Phoenix, and we're going to talk a little bit about realistically what could happen with these fans, okay?
Okay.
We talked about this a few weeks ago, and it was after we played LSU, and Kim Mulkey says, well, why don't the women play in Rupp Arena, okay? I really, really, really want the cards to lay out in the way that Louisville, who is projected as a 7 seed right now, moves up to the 6, where West Virginia is right now.
Oh, gosh.
And Kentucky and Louisville play each other in the second round of the NCAA tournament at Rupp Arena. That could happen. That could not. The odds of that happening are so slim to none. That is what I'm dreaming right now. But luckily, West Virginia is very close to Kentucky. And yes, I'm aware that it is like a 6-hour drive from Morgantown to Lexington, maybe further. But I would venture to say that West Virginia fans probably travel very well since they're a top 25 team. There's some momentum around the program. I don't think that game would be played at Rupp. I don't think any of the games would be played at Rupp, but I think that Memorial could be pretty packed for that game as well. So fingers crossed Kentucky even hosts, but also that they play against a team that travels well because we want to see a packed game.
Well, let me say this. I don't want their fan. Now, I don't think West Virginia fans. Now it is close, but I don't think they'll like. They're not like. How much does West Virginia care about women's basketball? Like, I don't think they're going to travel too
I
crazily.
mean, how much did Kentucky care about women's basketball until this season?
That's true, but I think with Kentucky this year, well, first of all, that game being at home and it being an NCAA tournament game, Kentucky fans will show up no matter what.
Well, yeah. I just meant
But
in general. They didn't care, and now West Virginia is a top 25 team.
that's
So you
true.
just have
I
to remember.
like how in all caps nobody said I cared. We appreciate that nobody. But I don't know. Like I see your point. Well, but I do want to say I don't want West Virginia fans to travel that well because if it's like the Tennessee game or the LSU game where there's like 10-15% West Virginia fans, that's not going to be a good look at all. But I think excuse me, I think regardless, Katie, whoever you play, first, second round, you're really just wanting to host. I think if you beat Oklahoma, that's a certainty. But I don't think Kentucky's going to fall from a 3 to a 5. I think Kentucky's a low 3, high 4 kind of
Mm-hmm.
situation. You really want to stick to a 3 because if you make it to the Sweet 16, you're most likely going to play a 2 seed. Whereas if you're a 4 seed, you're probably going to play a 1 seed. And so that's obviously something there to look at too, Katie.
Yeah, and right now I'm looking at the projection, and Kentucky would be projected to play UConn, which is obviously a little bit scary because they are the team that beat South Carolina on their home court. But I would rather play UConn than play South Carolina again, if I'm being totally honest. Definitely rather play UConn than Texas, and I would definitely rather play UConn than UCLA or another team like that. So I think that a 3 seed is obviously best case scenario here, but I guess we will see.
I think I'd rather play UCLA than UConn because I know they have Lauren Betts and Kiki Rice. I'm not worried about Kiki because we have Georgia, but Lauren Betts would obviously be a big problem because she's Reagan Beers, but I think a lot better. Um, well, she can't really shoot the 3 as well as Reagan can, but as far as being down low goes, um, I mean, I guess she could get our bigs in foul trouble, but UConn to me should be a 1 seed. I know they're the projected. I know they're a 2 right now, but UConn's only losses are to I think USC. I looked this up. I think at USC, maybe Notre Dame, and it's another really good team. Like it's all top 10
Mm.
teams that they've lost, and they lost to Tennessee. Which by the way, they lost to Tennessee. Kentucky beat Tennessee by 24. That looks a lot better for Kentucky, even though Tennessee kind of crapped the bed to end their season. Like that win over Tennessee looks pretty good. But Katie, I think I'd rather play UCLA almost. But the 1s and 2s are going to be so weird because
Mm.
I mean TCU is a 3 seed, and I think TCU has a case to be a 1. They just won their conference tournament. They only have 3 losses on the year. I think they're 30. They're either 30-3 or 31-3. Like, I wouldn't want to be the team that has to play TCU. Louisville being a 7, I really like that. Now, don't get me wrong, they won't make it out of stores. They'll lose to UConn in the second round in that case, or they could lose to Oregon in the first round if it ended up being like that. But I think it would be really interesting to see. I don't know. I'm super interested to see how things shake up, right? Because Kentucky
Mm-hmm.
being a 3 seed, like it gives you a much better path than what you probably would have predicted to start this year, Katie.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously this season has turned out a lot better than either of us expected it to be. So there's really no complaints, especially even being in contention for a 3 seed is kind of a crazy conversation to have, considering how honestly at the beginning of the season, like I think we all kind of thought that they'd make it to the second round, maybe Sweet 16. And I say we all as in everyone that did the little survey thing that we did earlier in the season at KSR. Um, yeah, I mean, I like kind of where Kentucky is at in this prediction. I feel like you've got a pretty, I would say, easier way to the Elite Eight. of course, you would have to play UConn. I think I would prefer UConn because I think the matchup is better than um, uh, UCLA. Just because, like we said earlier, I think UCLA's bigs are a lot more physical and we get our bigs in a lot more foul trouble. So I feel like that's my UConn argument. Of course, this is just a prediction, so this is not official at all. But I feel like in this prediction right now, Kentucky has a way to the Elite Eight. I think that they could go further, but I don't really know yet.
The Elite Eight is the furthest Kentucky's ever been. They've been there 4 times. I think it'd be interesting to see the path for Kentucky to get there. I think nobody makes a good point. He says at least the NCAA and men's and women's won't be as bad as going through this year's SEC. And I think that's totally valid. I think that's a very correct point. It's when you look at the SEC tournament and then the NCAA tournament, I think it is easier to make a run in the NCAA almost because, again, and I think Kenny or Don, I forget which coach. I know Kenny said it, but I think either Don, no, it was Vic Schaefer also said this. They both said your first game, even if you get the double bye, your first game is against a ranked team and most likely a top 15 team. Your next game is against a top 10 team. And then your championship game is against the top 5 team.
Yeah.
That 3-game stretch is much harder than a 6-game stretch where you play Poop State, crap Tech, and then you start playing some real teams. Like, you don't play. You play a fringe top 25 team in the second round. Now, obviously, once you get to the Sweet 16, you're playing top 15, top 10 teams. But at that point, Katie, I feel like it's easier to make a run in the NCAA tournament than it is the SEC tournament, which is kind of a crazy thing to say, but that's also just how deep and talented the conference is.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the numbers, and right now, the Big Ten has 12 teams. The SEC has 10. But you got to think about where those 10 SEC teams are ranked in the AP poll. I think right now 9 of them are top 20. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think 9 of them are top 20 in the AP poll. So it's just crazy to think about it like that because really, even though the Big Ten has more teams in the tournament, I truly think that the SEC has kind of been the gauntlet of women's basketball this year.
There's 8 teams in the top 25, and then Vanderbilt's sitting right outside of number 26. So there's 9 teams in the top 26 of the AP poll. But Katie, I'm interested to see now. Stephen, if you can hear me, put up the quad record slide because Kentucky, with the loss to Oklahoma, falls under 500 in quad 1, right? And obviously that doesn't look good. Like if you're sitting and looking at a resume, but Katie, I just want to compare some of the other resumes, right? Notre Dame, who is obviously going to be a 1 or a 2, most likely a 2 now, but they're 6-5. That's a 1-game difference, right? You look at somebody like West Virginia, they're 2-5. Ole Miss 6-9. LSU is 6-5. Kansas State 2-6 in quad 1. Start looking at some of the teams that are hovering around Kentucky, Katie, in the net. Ohio State 5-5. Alabama 5-7. Baylor 3-6. Tennessee 6-8. Right? And you go down a little bit. You have teams like Michigan who are 5-9. Vandy 3-9. Michigan State 4-8. Now, you just look at these teams, and like when you look at these teams, Katie, like that's a very impressive group there on that quad one slate. And then you have like Mississippi State and Louisville who are hovering in that 30-35 range, who could very easily be quad 1 games too. Especially Louisville, who's shown a lot of improvement to kind of end this season. But Stephen, if you want to go ahead and put it back on us, I just wanted to make the point that Kentucky's resume, like Katie, when you look at it, the quad 3 loss to A&M kind of stings, but even though you went under 500 in quad 1, you still have a really, really great resume, and I think that's shown kind of in the bracketology and the committee's previews where Kentucky, as of right now, they are a 3-4 seed in the tournament, Katie.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about how the resume, it sucks to be 5-6 in quad one, but then you think about, like you said, Mississippi State, who's at 31 in the net. So they're right on the cusp of being quad one. And Louisville is at 35 in the quad one. So they're pretty close, or in the net ranking. So they're pretty close to being quad one. And so even the quad two wins are pretty impressive, I would say. Most of them, I would say at least half of them are very impressive. Kentucky has had one of the harder schedules based off of like the strength of the schedule. It's been one of the hardest, I think, in the nation this year. And it goes back to kind of what we were talking about the SEC. It's a very difficult conference. And for Kenny Brooks to kind of come in and do this well in his first season when we see how many other SEC coaches are struggling. And you could also think about Kim Caldwell. I mean, it's her first year in the SEC as well. And she was doing very good and now she's struggling. And I think that it goes to show like Kenny was a great hire. I know we talk about this all the time. He has knocked this season out of the park. I think no matter what happens, obviously there's something to be proud of. But I think it also goes to show that like Kenny is, I believe, a championship coach. Even though it probably won't happen this year, I think that it can happen eventually. And I think it will happen pretty soon.
I like that. I like that. As you can see on the screen, Selection Sunday is this Sunday, March 16th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. I believe the men's selection show is like right before that. I think maybe on CBS or something. But, Katie, there's a lot to be excited about kind of moving forward. I know the SEC tournament kind of sucked, but you know what? The NCAA tournament is coming up, and why not go make a run? Why not avenge your loss against Oklahoma? Katie, we're going to go ahead and get out of here, start to kind of wrap this one up. But before we do you have anything to say?
I'm very excited for Selection Sunday, and I'm just really excited. I love March. I love March Madness. So, hoping for a couple really good Kentucky draws for men and women, but we will see on Sunday.
I think I may have said this last week, but I love this great sport way too much. And it's even gotten to the point where I will listen to the CBS March Madness like dun, 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 like unironically. And I did it earlier today, admittedly, and it was a great time. Excited to see where Kentucky lands, like you said. Go ahead, like, comment, subscribe on the KSR YouTube channel. Steven does a great job not only producing this podcast, but all of our other ones kind of keeping us afloat here. We got Kenny Brooks, as nobody says, March Pope. Should be a lot of excitement coming up. But, Katie, just real quick, one final prediction. Where's Kentucky going to land? What seed are they going to be, and how far are they going to make it in the tournament?
I'm thinking 3 seed. I feel very comfortable with the 3 seed right now. I don't know. It really just depends on the draw. My heart says Elite 8. My heart says Final 4. My heart says championship, but my brain is saying Sweet 16.
Okay. I will say high 4 seed, and I'll say Kentucky makes it to the Sweet 16. Now, next week when we come to record, we'll actually kind of revisit those predictions once the final draw is out, and we'll actually make a more, I guess, educated prediction from there. I'm Phoenix Stevens alongside Katie Hutchison. Kentucky women's basketball, they lost in the SEC tournament, but they're going to win a lot in the NCAA tournament. Let's just see where it all goes starting Sunday. This has been the Memorial Memo, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks, Steve.